Good Friday morning. Welcome to CounterPoints. We got an incredibly packed show today. I'm going to have to probably trim some of the context out of my long and rambling answers today. There's so much to get to. I mean, the hurricane is still barreling its way through this country. Wishing everybody in South Carolina the best. Florida recovering these apocalyptic scenes that we're seeing down there.
Reports suggest death tolls already in the hundreds. We have no idea where that number's going to land.
Brutal, just absolutely brutal. We'll have more on that next week. This week we have so much to get through in terms of both domestic and global politics. There's a presidential election in Brazil that we're going to talk about later. That's coming up on Sunday. We had elections in Italy, and we have elections in the United States of America coming up.
That's right.
And so let's start with Pennsylvania. Right, so the Fetterman odds, the polls that were coming out over the last several months that were showing Fetterman with these double-digit leads, I think they were fun to see, and I think we have an element there. They were fun to see from the left. It's like it's always fun to see Dr. Oz getting owned, but I don't think anybody took them too seriously to the extent that Fetterman was actually going to win by double digits. It's still Pennsylvania now. Shapiro, the gubernatorial candidate, he may actually end up winning by 10 points against Mastriano, and I'm curious for your take on this. This is a case where the hardcore MAGA wing really got the guy they wanted, and the Democrats got the guy they wanted, Mastriano, and it looks like he's getting utterly hammered. So I'm wondering, do you think he has any shot whatsoever, and how do you think that race kind of influences the Senate race? Does it lead to more ticket splitting, or does it drag Oz down?
I think it probably leads to higher turnout and enthusiasm, and that's what midterm elections are really all about. And,
on both sides?
Right, exactly. And yes. So who benefits from that is the big question, and I could see that actually being a motivator on both sides in a way that Oz and Fetterman aren't. Maybe Oz is a big draw. I don't know. I highly doubt that.
Draw on Twitter.
Yeah. But actually, what's interesting about this is over the course of the summer, those polls were coming out with Fetterman up. And that was, I think, for people taking that seriously, which included the establishment wing of the Republican Party that was unhappy with the choices in the Pennsylvania primary and has been unhappy with certain races from Blake Masters to J.D. Vance. They took that very seriously. And it was another sort of piece of this increasing tension between the establishment and maybe the sort of MAGA wing of the Republican Party. And that was always, I think, foolish, because until the money starts pouring into these races in the fall after Labor Day, when that starts happening, you see the messaging on both sides start to congeal, and you see the momentum start pushing in the direction that it will ultimately end up in. And so some of these summer analyses, whether they were in Ohio or Pennsylvania, I think or Georgia for that matter, that's not to say, I think everyone is a great candidate on the Republican slate, far from it. But I do think that there was a lot of premature anxiety, both in Republican areas and a lot of premature enthusiasm in Democratic areas. And I'll add to that, there are a lot of serious pollsters that I would argue are center-left who are still saying that we are not gauging actual voting patterns very well, especially in Rust Belt states that happen to be, once again, the critical key race states going forward. Right.
The theory in 2016, which seems to be borne out somewhat over the past couple cycles, is this silent or Trump voter, this voter who non-responding to polls is just refusing to participate in that process. And there have always been millions of people who don't want to participate in that process, but the difference has been that there were just as many Democrats, independents, and Republicans who didn't want to participate in it, so it didn't mess up your numbers. Now it does seem weighted to Republicans. In 2020, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin in particular, the polls missed substantially. So it feels like Fetterman, to feel comfortable on election night, kind of needs a 5 or 6 point lead
and
going in.
His margin now is already down to 4 and 2, and we had an element that showed it, that these
Cohn
big
showing some.
Yeah, Nate Cohn showing these big decreases, and I actually don't really know how that plays out for Mastriano, but I do think it is a lot of the typical Beltway horse race over the summer, that analysis jumped the gun in big ways, knowing, or probably should have known. It's an interesting example of how the media tries to or can influence the way money goes into these races and the way elections look. Because if all of the chatter is like Oz is a dud, everyone in Pennsylvania loves Fetterman, that totally changes the way that people in DC let it change the way that they look at these different races, and it conditions the consultants and all of these different people to see things out of whack with what they actually are. And I think the point about Wisconsin is a really good one. Even Mitch McConnell abandoned Ron Johnson in his last race.
Right.
That is actually really a huge, huge sign of how bad DC is at reading tea leaves these days.
Right. And at the same time, Fetterman's stroke, I think, played a role in this in a significant way. He hasn't been able to campaign like he was able to campaign up until the primary, and that didn't really sink in for a lot of people for several weeks, past the primary. Now we are getting a real sense that that his recovery is not complete yet, and he's starting to address that more head on, which I think is the right thing to do, and to emphasize, look, this is a recovery process. Like I'm going to continue to improve. These are the things I need to do to improve, but it's campaigning with a hand tied behind your back. But let's go quickly around the country. Arizona, the conventional wisdom in DC seems to be that Mark Kelly, a Democrat, is in a very strong position there. How are Republicans feeling about Arizona at this point?
Well, that race is one of the most contentious in terms of this internecine battle in the Republican Party, because it was clear that Mitch McConnell wanted Peter Thiel to put more of his own money into it. McConnell pulled some ads in August, or it was around Labor Day. McConnell pulled some planned ads for Blake Masters. Blake Masters is sort of championed by the new right wing of the party. We interviewed him. I think he's a very interesting candidate, and I like a lot of what he says. But the Mitch McConnells of the world are now saying this is not winnable. McConnell's doing a couple of fundraisers for him, but still...
Candidate quality. He was referring partly to Masters, probably, right?
Candidate quality, right. Yeah. And this is Mitch McConnell saying that in August, the Senate Majority Leader starting to turn his fire on the candidates going into the election cycle. And I think probably, Ryan, partially because of this incorrect reading of the tea leaves, I do think Masters is a better candidate than a lot of people in D.C. realize. And I do think the more that we see money going into that race on both sides of it. I'm not just talking about money going into Masters. I'm talking about just in general, when you have the resources that are actually going to look like what they look like in the weeks before Election Day. So people are on the message that they want to be running on before Election Day. And as we get closer to Election Day and people are actually voting, I think Masters is going to close the gap. And I think it's going to be a close election. I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than what a lot of people in D.C. realize. Now, Masters may lose. Right. I don't know. But at the end of the day, that is one of the most, if you're looking for a race that shows all of the different dynamics in the Republican Party, look at Arizona. And
New Hampshire, I thought, was going to be the state that was the sleeper, that was going to be the most likely to flip Democrat to Republican. Yeah. But then Republicans nominated this interesting character, retired general, I forget the guy's name. Don Bolduc, who kind of a Twitter character. I kind of followed his timeline. It's a lot of fun.
I interviewed him once as well. And he's very charismatic.
Interesting dude. But it seems like everybody's taken New Hampshire off the map now. That it looks like Maggie Hassan went from kind of either toss-up to likely Republican to now comfortable Democrat. Is Bolduc that unappealing to kind of swing voting New Hampshire voters that this race is over?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that how you're feeling about this race?
I don't know. New Hampshire is such an interesting state, and you probably would know more about this than I do, but the New Hampshire voters are not your especially on the Republican side, not your typical Republican voters at all, sort of more libertarian leaning, which makes it an interesting test case in the kind of MAGA moment. How are New Hampshire Republicans reacting to more MAGA Republicans, I think is actually kind of a fascinating case study. Yeah. So I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what's happening in New Hampshire, but I do think the context of the economy right now, where in the summer Democrats started to feel really good. August had passed the Inflation Reduction Act, gas prices had come down a little bit. They were still really high. All of that context, I think, had Democrats feeling way better than they should have been about the fall in August. And now that we're almost in October, I mean, we're doing this block, and next time we're here, we'll be October. We'll be about a month away from the elections. The economy is looking worse, and the Inflation Reduction Act and the correlation between the Inflation Reduction Act and the stock market is pretty bad for Democrats, because you can see it just dipping as soon as it's passed, whether or not you can sort of parse that in
Jerome
different
Powell,
ways.
but yes.
Yes, of course. You can parse that in different ways. The effect on average Americans under a Biden administration, though, is not good for Democrats. It's a drag on these tickets.
And speaking of which, we'll be here Wednesday next week.
That's right. Well, we'll be pre-taping Wednesday.
I think we're going to air it on Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we'll both be gone for the weekend, Columbus Day weekend.
That's
I think
right.
we're going to air it on Wednesday.
Okay, we'll look
Pre-tape,
forward to that.
It'll be old news by Friday.
Old news, that's true.
I now think the sleeper is Nevada.
Tell me more.
So Cortez Masto is running for re-election. She's a Democrat in Nevada. And I think that Nevada got hit, Las Vegas in particular, got hit harder than almost anywhere in the country by the pandemic, and particularly by policies that are associated with Democrats shutting down the economy. The Las Vegas economy just was completely annihilated. And as a result, you have this widespread economic misery. And to the extent that Las Vegas was the place that powered Democrats so that they could overcome the rest of the state, if they lose just a small margin in Vegas, then that's enough for them. And with a lot of the kind of Mexican American population down there, the abortion issue might not have the same kind of resonance that it would have in other parts of the country, the voters that Democrats really rely on in Vegas. So I believe the Nevada Republicans got the kind of non-scary Republican that they wanted to, right, in the primary. And so you don't have the kind of MAGA effect that's going to drag a couple points off of the Republican.
Although the counterpoint to that is in midterm elections, which are about energy and turnout, the MAGA Republican candidates, and if you're looking at somebody like, for instance, J.D. Vance, these are people or Herschel Walker might be an example, where you actually do energize voters who actually want to go out and not vote for the milquetoast, Mitt Romney Republican, but are energized to go out and be a part of what they see as change. And that's on both sides. That's not just about Republicans, but that is what a lot of DC Republicans cannot wrap their heads around about the MAGA base, is that the average Republican voter is actually very, very excited about. And actually, these people do appeal to the average Republican voter. Even if it makes Mitch McConnell uncomfortable, it can actually have an effect on the outcome.
I love that you're all in on the turnout idea, because on the left, I 1,000% believe that if you put like a Sanders wing candidate out there, you're going to inspire people to come out to the polls, give them something to actually vote for. When I look over at the other side, I'm like, nobody's going to want to come out for them.
I got to go vote for Joe Crowley.
So it's funny. Yeah, it is. I don't know why I can't get my head around the idea that there could be an advantage to running some of these MAGA candidates.
I mean, you're from Pennsylvania.
Right, and Pennsylvania is a lot of suburbs. It's true that it's true that like the Carville thing, you got Philadelphia on one side, Pittsburgh on the other, and Alabama in the middle. There's still a lot of truth to that. But there's also a massive suburban vote in Pennsylvania that is turned off by a lot of that stuff.
True.
And it would be turned off by some of the, like, if AOC was like on the ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. And both parties know that, and that's why they start targeting these suburban, especially educated suburban women. That's become this like just treasure trove demographic for both parties. But at the same time, I think the other thing that factors into this, I mean, abortion clearly will, I think, have some effect, but you also then have education, which totally, if you look at what happened in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin just a year ago, favors Republicans if they run on the issue in an appealing and convincing way, which is a very big if.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.